What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Smooth Podcast, simply motivating others onward through hope. Here, sitting across from me, Zach Levesque. Zach Levesque, what's going on, man?
What's going on? Thanks for having me.
Listen, I owe a ton to this person sitting across from me. A lot of the content that you see me doing, whether it be the podcast or any of the mental health, any of the motivation, any of the personal development content that you see, is due to him allowing me to use his studio for very close to nothing. And I extremely appreciate that. Extremely grateful. This man sitting across from me has opened my eyes to new horizons and new possibilities that I wasn't too sure if I would find in Rhode Island. But after kind of plugging into his network, after going to a bunch of his events, after seeing what he's all about, he's really made me kind of like second guess myself into what truly my potential could be and will be. And so I just want to sincerely thank you for that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
So Zach, where does your story start, right? Because you don't wake up one day as the vice president of a bank.
Yeah. I think, like any story, there's challenges, there's opportunity, there's adversity. And I think my life story changed a little bit when I was 13 years old. So I grew up middle class, went to Catholic high school, went to Catholic elementary school, but actually before high school, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. A lot of people don't know that about me. And it's actually not something I talk about. I've probably done 20 or 30 podcasts, but interesting question. I started to look at life very differently at a young age. It forced me to. It forced me to appreciate the now, but also appreciate the fact that it's a journey. And I think because I was so young, 13, you listen to your parents, right? The first thing you do, especially when it's health related, mom, dad, am I okay? Am I going to be okay? So I think it changed my mindset. And because ultimately I was okay, and this was, 30 years ago, it forced me to look at life a lot differently and appreciate people more and appreciate my own health more, mental health. And I think it also forced me to always kind of look at my neighbor. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but at a young age, I always felt for people. I always looked at people that might be in unfortunate circumstances and tried to help. And that's not bullshit. That's just me being honest. I think that was one of the things that happened in my life that changed me. So I look at that as a positive, and that's all mindset, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody looks at medical issues as positives, but I looked at it as a positive because I made it through and it changed me for the better. Sure.
So Zach, what college did you go to?
Quinnipiac. So it was a college, university when I graduated in Hamden, Connecticut. So I went for, and I'm not sweating, it's just hot in here. Right? I went to,
blame the owner of the studio.
Yeah, right. I went to Bishop Hendricken High School, and then I went to Quinnipiac. And I wasn't, I wouldn't say I was a great student. I would say I was a good student. Not high honors, but honors. And I felt like in college, I just kind of did enough to maybe get a job when I graduated. But I was always involved in the social aspect of school too. I wanted to have fun. And I realized that it was an opportunity to almost be like quasi-independent, right? You're independent, but you're not in college.
Yeah.
I lived on campus. So I had a good time and I definitely learned, but it taught me how to be a little more independent because you're setting your own schedule.
Sure.
And, listen, the college conversation could go a million ways. I've met so many successful people that didn't go to college.
Sure.
If you have the opportunity to college, go. But it is absolutely not a requirement to be successful to go to college. I've never believed that.
Did you know what you wanted to do the minute you walked into college, or was that something that was developed later on?
So my whole life, people told me that I would be like a banker, and I would tell people that. I always liked money, and I always wanted to understand it. And I always appreciated that lifestyle, but I didn't know exactly where in banking I would fit. So I would say I had more of a marketing and branding mind when I was in college. So in my head, maybe I was going to go to an agency in New York and work at some big time ad agency and put a suit on and be downtown in New York having fun.
Yeah.
But it never materialized. And actually, when I graduated college in the early 2000s, the job market was terrible. So it was a situation when I graduated and everybody around me was just find a job. It's not easy.
Yeah.
So that really changed my path,
right,
so to speak. I think if I graduated in a better economy, I probably would have had a different life, to be honest with you.
It's so crazy how like the way the economy is when we're growing up, how much that shapes us.
Absolutely.
When I was in high school, it was during the mortgage crash of like 05, 06, 07, and there was no jobs around.
Nothing.
So I'm just trying to get a job at Burger King, McDonald's, just to earn something, and nothing was available.
Yeah.
And when I got the opportunity to kind of work odd-end jobs and work multiple jobs, ever since I was able to, I never had less than 3 streams of income. And something that fires and fuels me is just remembering that kid that was banging on KFC's door and they were like, oh no, we're not hiring.
I feel like, you have a good story. Did you say you had 3 jobs? Or
Oh no, I've like since I've never had less than 3 streams of income. Like since college, I would say.
Yeah, and I've always, for some reason, been drawn to individuals and people that, like, not to say that, it's a nature versus nurture conversation. Not to say that somebody who grows up in a tough environment, there's no predestination when it comes to life. Like,
sure,
somebody that grows up with everything, that doesn't mean that they're going to have a successful career. And the antithesis of that is somebody that grows up with nothing. That doesn't mean that they have no opportunity. Correct. Right? Obviously, it's tougher depending on the environment. But I've always been drawn to individuals that didn't have the opportunities that either I had or other people had, and just absolutely crushed it. Because I think that people don't realize probably how tough that is. And just to be successful, it's not about being successful like here, right now, right? Mm-hmm. So you look at successful people, they're successful today, Monday, but they could ruin it all in the next 48 hours and completely change your life. And that's one of the things I think about success, and why I always try to stay in that mindset. You need to continually make really good decisions every single day. And eventually that compounds into something great, but it takes a long time. And it also can be derailed with one bad decision. I think about that a lot.
100%.
Because I've seen it happen. I've seen people around me that were here and are on the ground floor right now because they made so many mistakes.
And it gets harder and harder, right? Because you're so disciplined and you've been making the right choice. You almost feel as if I deserve to make a bad decision every now and then. Correct. But that's when you lose it all. That's the point where you kind of like drop down a tier. Correct. And so I like the way that you said that, because it truly reigns true.
It does. And I've had some people very close to me that did just make a couple bad decisions. And when you talk about success, a lot of people ask me about, whatever, when did you start to become successful? What does your life look like? What are your goals, etc.? I really feel like when I look at the mistakes people that are around me have made, it's almost like you just said before, I deserve that. I've been putting in the work. I've done this. I'm gonna reward myself. Yeah. But it's never worth it. And to be honest with you, I haven't, knock on wood, I haven't really been challenged with tough decisions, or that doesn't really enter my mind anymore. But whenever I think about an important decision, could even be my time, something I'm committing to time-wise, I just think about my family. Yeah. Think about my wife and my son. Does that affect them? Because it's not, especially when you have a family and a child or children, your decisions don't just affect you, they affect everybody in your circle and network. Correct. So to me, it's very easy for me to make the right decision now, where it wasn't before when I didn't have that responsibility. I feel like when people have more responsibility, if they're a good person, it just gets easier to make decisions. Yeah. I find it that way. Yeah. Yeah. If they want to make the right one. Right. Correct. Yeah. Correct. Okay. So after college, tell me what's happening here. So college, tough job market. And I had an opportunity to get into mortgages because my father's good friend's niece had a mortgage company. So it was totally unplanned. And again, in my head, marketing guy. So I took the job, got into mortgage sales, worked for a broker. And this was 2004. And now when you say got into mortgage sales, did you know a lot about the mortgage industry before then? I knew nothing. Interesting. So I just was put into environment. I was given some names, call, see what you can do. And it was baptism by fire. I was there for about a year and a half. And then I transitioned there were 2 owners of the company. One of them saw some promise in me and he said, let's start a company. I said, I don't have any money, literally, right? He said, you don't need money. It's called sweat equity. You're going to work your butt off and you're going to be vice president. I'm going to be president. So took that transition. Now, this was a year and a half before the huge crash, financial crisis in 06 and 07. So a year and a half of prosperity, and then boom, we hit a wall. And that period of time was tough. I was just in my career. I was doing very well, right? I worked myself up to sales manager, et cetera. Now I'm vice president of a company. And it was, like you said, you were just trying to find a job. It was bad. It was barren. There was nothing moving. The real estate market absolutely stalled. And it's tough now because there's low inventory, but it's a completely different market.
Yeah.
That was like doom and gloom, depression. It wasn't a depression, but it was like a real estate depression.
Mm-hmm.
And the crazy thing is, during that time, 08 and 09, when we started to maybe emerge a little bit out of that crisis, when people asked me what I did, it was like I was, I like I was the worst person on earth. Oh, you're in mortgages? And they also in their head is like, how does this guy surviving? How are you in mortgages? And that's part of my character. Like, I found a niche. I figured out soon that I was good at it. It was a unique niche, and I made it through the toughest 2 or 3 year period ever. So I looked at that like, wow, this is my calling. And if I can make it through the worst time that anybody's seen in this industry, then what's going to happen in the good times? So I that stuck in my head. And from there, worked myself up to a branch manager position. And there's been, a lot of continuity in my career, where now I'm a regional vice president of a bank that just went public about 2 months ago. So, I've been in the industry a long time. What's unique about my industry is things change every single day. Rates change, guidelines change, inventory changes. But I truly love what I do because, the house, no matter what anybody says, is still the American dream, right? And it's an investment. You can utilize it as an investment, but it's also where you go home.
Yeah, yeah. Why the change from Home Point to North Point?
So Home Point, I'm trying to think of the year. Home Point sold their retail operations to North Point. There was a transition there. So
it's a totally different company.
Totally different company.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Home Point was actually a publicly traded company, but they exited retail. They were in a correspondent and retail channel. Correspondent is a different channel. Retail is direct to consumer. So we're retail, which means somebody calls us, we help facilitate the financing, whether the bank holds a note or sells it. But North Point was probably definitely the best thing that happened in my career, because it brought so much opportunity. I never had a real lineage, an opportunity to go vertical in my career. I was always just a branch manager, and we close loans, and you're compensated for that. But as of about a year ago, I have a voice at the bank, and the voice is not my voice. It's for everybody that I work with. When people ask me, and honestly, when people ask me, I'm out with some of the sales guys, oh, are you his boss? I'm like, I don't know what that means. I've never cared about titles. I think they're required to understand, decision making and leadership and how to get resources to everybody. But I've never believed in that title.
Yeah.
I think everybody has a role.
Yeah.
And from here to here in an organization.
Yeah.
And everybody's important.
And I'd like to think that I was doing a little digging, and it does seem like even for media like podcasts, you were kind of early on that as well, especially when it came to like roundtable radio. That was all the way in 2015. What was kind of like the ideology and the thought process of putting out content like that?
Yeah, so I, truthfully, even with this podcast studio, I just didn't have the time to execute the content because, this is a lot of work. You have to do it consistently. And I'm a mortgage and finance guy. I'm not a content producer. So I think my mantra in anything that I've ever done, mostly in real estate and finance, has always been to think and be different. So when I was approached to either do something radio, and this is, like you said, 8-9 years ago, nobody was doing that. And when I was approached to go on TV, which I go on the Rhode show, once a month, I said, I'll do it. And I feel like some people are professional content produce. Like, that's not what I do.
Right.
I just try to at least chip away and showcase how we're different at the bank, how I'm different as a leader, because hopefully people get something from it. And whether or not they buy a house and come to us, that doesn't even matter to me. Of course, we want business, but I'm a student of the game. I read a lot. I learn a lot from people. I get motivated from people. And if somebody can get some utility out of something I say, then great. We're here. Like, why not make the world a better place? And with the podcast studio, that was a point. I was going to produce my own podcast, which I started to, and I'm like, this is too much work. To be honest with you,
it's a lot.
And I just said, hey, we have this great space. We have all this equipment. Pay it forward. I've always been a pay it forward person.
Yeah.
So it was really just, I always challenged myself to be different and think outside the box.
Yeah.
And still to this day, I do. There's only so much time in the day when I get home.
Right.
But, hopefully, I don't know, as I get older, maybe there's less ideas, but you try to be different like you. Right?
Yeah.
You're doing this, but this is not how you get paid.
Correct.
I'm sitting here, I'm not getting paid. This is not how I get paid. But you have a passion for it, and I'm sure people listen to you, and I'm sure you've probably helped somebody you might have really helped somebody,
right,
and have no clue. Like, that's what it's about.
Yeah. I think to kind of like piggyback onto that notion, I think that one of our objectives with any kind of level of success, because we all know that there's multiple levels of success, but any level of success that we do pay it forward and we do kind of motivate others to achieve more, right?
Yep.
Even with my first, I guess, speaking event and networking event, it was stemmed from what you did, and I was just like, oh wow, like this is really cool. I wonder if I could do one of these, right? And I've never been ashamed to say, oh yeah, like I got this idea from such and such, or this is modeled after such and such, because I think that there's not one single idea that's 100% original right now, but you can grab from different people and make your own.
Especially when it's all shared. That's why things might seem unoriginal, because there's so much connection in our world now where there wasn't. So you could have heard something 20 years ago and you could say, I just made it up. You wouldn't even know.
Right.
And to your point, one of my favorite quotes, success leaves footprints. Like if I've taken so many things from either an event I saw or a contest. I'm not copying. We're just trying to figure out the best way to get our message out.
Yeah.
What we're trying to project.
Correct. Question: if you were to invest in any Rhode Island city, what city would you invest in and why?
For what purpose? Are you talking real estate?
This is real estate.
In infrastructure, or like to buy a property?
To either buy the land and build, or to you think that the property value is going to rise exponentially more than the other cities around it.
Yeah. So first, I think in today's day and age, people are thinking more about money in their pocket, inflation, how much things cost. Sometimes I feel like there's not enough due diligence done on, property taxes, city taxes. Like, you could Google in the state of Rhode Island, what are the tax rates, property tax rates for every town in the city of Rhode Island? Like, if I was looking at a house, I'd start there, because some taxes are exponentially higher than other cities. Granted, higher taxes usually better infrastructure, better schools, but it's not always the case. So I would say, especially in our state, real estate is very skewed. You have your higher end proximity to water, right? The closer to water you get, the more expensive property is. The only difference is probably like east side of Providence, which is a little bit of an anomaly. But, I would focus on, first you have to figure out what you're buying the real estate for. So if you're buying it to rent, you're going to want to be in an area that's safe, right? You're buying an investment property, an area that there's a lot of businesses there, because you want a consolidation of people. You need a lot of renters, healthy rent rates, somewhat affordable rent rates. So for me, it's always, I want to own something in a area that I feel is safe, an area that I feel like people would want to rent. I would start there. When it comes to ownership, Airbnb, second home, my thinking would change based on that. But I guess it's kind of a tough question to answer, but I got to be honest with you. I grew up in Rhode Island. Every single city in the state has its attributes, whether it's proximity to water. In Providence, we're sitting in Turk's Head. My office is in Providence. I love the Friars. I love all the restaurants. So I guess it's, depends on what lens you're seeing it through and what your objectives are. But rental, there's a lot of interest in Pawtucket, right? The soccer stadium,
Sure.
the new train. Providence has always been one of the hottest markets. And if you do research, it still is, because property values in Rhode Island, we might think they're high, but other states look at Rhode Island and they think we're low based on their real estate.
Yeah.
And that's like a tough thing to digest, but people in Boston are looking at Rhode Island real estate saying that's cheap. So it's all just perspective.
Yeah. I think that's interesting too. Speaking of kind of what you just said, if we do not have a rental law or a rental limit law,
you're talking rent control.
Correct.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's going to be a point where outside Massachusetts, Connecticut even buy up more of the property because they can kind of set the rent however they want to set it? Or do you think things will dwindle down as the rental market dwindles down?
Yeah, I think that's a tough question. And it's all, when you look at investors, they're looking at cap rate. They need to make a return, right? Everybody needs to make a return. So the argument there on the landlord side is, well, if the rent's capped, why would I buy there? I'm going to sell, right? So, I think it's really dependent, and there's a lot of political influences on that, and there's no right or wrong area. Landlords are always going to say they hate it, and renters are going to say that they love it because it's rent control. I get that. Mm-hmm. I think at the end of the day, there's no perfect formula, and free markets are usually right historically, So I will tell you that, yeah, if there's a consolidated area and all of a sudden there was this, massive rent control, I think it would affect current owners and it would affect people that are looking to get into that market. Of course, we don't deal with that as much as like New York and Mass, but if you look at, I have a lot of friends that are property owners and they'll go and fight it, and they're not trying to gouge the renters. Just everything is more expensive. Rates are higher. Property values are higher. Yeah. So it's almost like going the opposite way. Everything's coming this way, and if rent is reduced, how does that work? Right. But the intent is there. It's just impossible to keep everybody happy.
Yeah. I see these maps all the time, and I don't know if like my algorithm is just set up where I'm seeing the maps all the time, but there's maps about the average household income that you need to buy a house in certain states, right? In Rhode Island right now, I think it's around a 105 or 110 at this point. To have a good living in today's world, how much do you think the household income has to be?
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, the first thing I would say is, if you're an individual that's looking at property and you're trying to look at your expenses, look at your income, and you're not sure if you can afford a house based on today's median income price. I think the median income is over 500 sale price. I think it just went over 500 for the first. Don't quote me, but pretty sure I saw that. Which is exponentially higher than it was 3 or 4 years ago, along with all costs of other goods and services because of inflation, obviously. A lot of individuals are looking at multis. That's why they're trying to leverage, get some rental income, which helps. And not all the time, but most of the time, getting into a multi, if you're getting rental, it helps you, and your monthly mortgage payment is going to be a lot less than if you went out and bought a single. So I think that human beings, we're survivors, right? And especially if somebody wants a house, they're going to figure it out and figure out a plan that makes sense for them. If there's a need, somebody has they get married or they have a child or whatever. So I think that's why we've seen such a shift where people are either becoming investors or they're getting into properties that have investment potential, because a lot of individuals will buy a multi, 2-stage plan. So let's think ahead. So I'm going to buy a 2-unit. I'm going to live in it for a couple of years. I'm going to get rent to help me for my mortgage payment. And then hopefully in a couple of years, I'm making a little more money. Maybe I've saved a little more money. I'm going to buy a single. Then I'm going to rent out the other unit. Now I have positive cash flow. So I actually have net income. And now maybe I'm making $300, $400, $500 a month on that. I can utilize that to put towards a new mortgage. Yeah. So I think that you're seeing much more intent. And I will say this, and this goes for any space in the world. Your average homeowner and potential homeowner is so much more knowledgeable than they were 5-10 years ago. Yeah. And the reason for that is simple: information. Now, not all information is valid and vetted. So you have to be careful about where you get your information. But there's a lot of intelligent people on all of these social channels that have really good plans of getting into a home. So I think that we're in a unique space in our time. I think the first time home buyer that's buying a single family is the most challenged right now. And if you're out there and you're listening and you're frustrated and you haven't thought about looking at buying a multi, maybe that's what you should do. You know, FHA is 3.5% down. You can buy a 2, 3, 4 unit, a lot of rental income. So for some people that might not be their dream home, but a very small amount of people buy their first home. It's their dream home.
Correct.
Didn't happen with me. Maybe it's 2, 3, 4, 5 purchases before you get there.
Speaking of which, Grant Cardone talks a lot about how buying a primary residence is just a bad investment. He agrees with real estate investing as as a way of like getting rental income, but he's kind of against it with like your own kind of house. Obviously, you would feel different. Why do you feel like he says that, and why do you feel like he's wrong at that?
He's definitely wrong, but he knows he's wrong, right?
Interesting.
So, and the reality of an individual like him, he's a money raiser. He's loud. He has to be different. He has to say different things to get attention. He's obviously very intelligent. You don't get to that position without being intelligent.
Right.
That's his business plan. His business plan is building passive income through real estate. You don't build passive income through real estate with a primary. You can build passive equity, right?
Leverage or something like that. Yeah.
Right. And it kind of goes against what his whole pitch is. He's one of the world's, if not the world's largest real estate crowdfunder. That's what he is, right? He has all these funds. So he's raising money to purchase. So why would he talk about a primary? That's not what he's pitching. That's the thing about these guys. They're pitching when they're not pitching. They are the pitch. That's his life, and he wants to show that. You can get where I am if you follow my steps. But the step doesn't include buying a primary, because somebody putting their money into a primary, how does that help him? It doesn't. Right. He wants the money to put into passive real estate. Yeah. So, and listen, I'm not even talking about anything negative with him, but that's not his plan. So he wants you to follow his plan. Now, the primary home conversation is a personal one. That's very different. He's a business on a personal level, and I actually love to talk about this. Real estate, we've been taught recently, is an investment. Correct. Everything is investment. The best investment you can make, and it's definitely true. But I argue that you can't just look at real estate like an investment, especially if it's your primary. It's your life. It's where you wake up. It's where you make memories, where you have parties. Like, I remember every single birthday party I had when I grew up at my house, because we had a pool. Again, I grew up in West Warwick and Coventry. I grew up on an average street in an average house, but we had a pool, so I consider myself very lucky. You can't take those memories away. Investment, sure, but there's so much utility in real estate and a primary. So I always try to give advice to people. You can't just look at real estate like an investment. This is your life. You know, I have a 2.5-year-old son. He grew up every single day in my house. I'm going to remember that until the last breath that I take. That's special. That's not an investment. Sure, maybe I'll make money on it when I sell it, but I do not look at it that way. Yeah. I put a pool in. That's memories. I was out there all day yesterday with fathers, my father-in-law. That's what the house is for. And I think people lose sight of that. You can't just look at a house as an investment. You cannot. It's part of your core. It's part of your life. That's the personal aspect of it.
I don't want to put too much of your business out there, but you know, you kind of bought the land and developed your house. What's the difference between that versus buying a new construction?
Like buying a home that's finished to somebody else. Just, you know, you're painting your picture. You're doing everything the way that you want to do it. I mean, granted, financially, you can't do everything that you want to do, but it is a difficult process. It takes a long time, but you're designing your home, whether it's your dream home or not. So it was an amazing experience. What I like about it is nobody has my house, right? There's no house that's like my house. It's like DNA. Your house has its own DNA, especially if you build it yourself and design it. Now, I look back, and I think we moved in about 3.5 years ago. There's a million things I would change, but it doesn't bother me because I know more now than I did when we started building the house. But if you have time is the biggest thing. If you have the time and financial ability to do it, then do it. It takes a while, though.
When's the last time you shared space with someone that you were in awe of?
just spend time with, or like personal?
Yep.
I don't know if awe is the right word. I mean, I've been around some great high level people, but it's not always the high level people that, you know, you get an experience from, you get changed by. I would say there's people in my life still to this day that affect me, even if I don't talk to them or see them. And being around them is like a different feeling. Like, I have probably maybe 3 mentors, and one of them has nothing to do with business. So, you know, first of all, I don't get in awe of like celebrity. I don't, you know, I think they're different and they work hard, but I don't get in awe of people like that. Mm-hmm. I could say, and just pivoting a little bit, you probably know this about me, and I'll plug CES MMA, but I'm an announcer for the mixed martial arts, which is like regional. We actually have a show in Foxwoods in August. I'm in awe of those guys sometimes, and that might sound silly to you, but, you know, I think anytime somebody's a professional in any industry, any sport, they're different. And I think sometimes those guys don't get the respect that they deserve. Where it's just like, well, you know, I didn't grow up fighting people and I can't punch, so those guys can. Like, it has nothing to do with that. Yeah. I've never seen human beings so focused as 5 seconds before they start to fight. Never seen it. I would say I've been in awe of some people in the cage. And it's not because it's a physical thing and I'm not promoting violence, but I've never seen so much focus and concentration as professional mixed martial arts athletes. It's amazing. Yeah.
What's the one character trait that you deem as an absolute necessity for somebody to be successful?
I would say having the right mindset, but also I'm a true believer that, you know, you could have a crazy escalation in your career. I'm talking go from 0 to 100, but you have to have complete control over your personal and social life, because none of that matters. That all falls apart. So I can tell you that specifically for me, my life changed dramatically when I got my life in order. And for me, that was, I started to read, started to go home early, drink less, go to the gym, all the things that people talk about, but like it works, right? And that's where that consistent decision making comes in. And that's why you see people all the way up here, and we've seen it, tragic complete downfalls, social. That's always what happens, right? Yeah. So number one is mindset, curating the right mindset to win, but also realizing that if all your goals and ambitions are business, you shouldn't even start until you make sure that your personal and social life is in order. I don't mean social going out. I mean being a good person. You know, to me, if somebody's super successful, they're worth 80 million and they have kids that they don't talk to, that person doesn't impress me. Maybe because I have a lot of money, I don't care about that. I believe in true life balance. Yeah. And eventually that's probably going to go the other way for that individual. And I don't wish that upon everybody, but you know, I'm a true believer that you can't have consistent success unless you have your things in order at home, in your life, with your personal relationships. To me, that changed my life dramatically. And also, honestly, reading. I haven't met many people that are successful that do not read books, honestly. I don't know if you feel. Do you read?
Yeah.
You have to, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I you know, and reading is just like, it's such a simple thing, and everybody has different perspectives on what's interesting to them. But I would say reading changed my life as well.
Being a real estate expert, how many like flips have you kind of like had your finger on, and either, you know, the money aspect, the coordinating loans aspect, the getting the proper people in place aspect, the I don't have anything but this guy does aspect, like that just has like your fingerprint.
You're saying over the years?
Yep.
Thousands.
Do any of them stick out to you?
I would say the ones that stick out, I can't say specifically the properties, but more who was affected by the transaction. So on the bank side, it's the first time home buyer. You know, I've had conversations, and I don't originate anymore for the bank. So I'm not dealing with the ultimate consumer. My role is a little different at the bank, but we have 12 originators here in Providence, and obviously I support them. Once in a while, I'll get on the phone with a client. I've had multiple calls in the last couple of years. Guys, thank you. I really did not think I could ever buy a home. You know, that's special. That's unique. And that's why we've talked about this before. The money aspect doesn't matter. That's never really mattered to me. Making a difference is great, but also just providing as much support to either the people that are utilizing or involved in transactions with me or the team, but also being as positive of an influence with everybody around me. That's what resonates to me. And like, I've had many conversations, whether it's a realtor or somebody that's involved with, you know, could be MMA or personal life or whatever. I've had multiple people tell me that just by watching what I'm doing and decisions that I'm making, it changed their life. And it's just very simple. It just comes back to having continuity in your decision making.
Yeah.
Just like doing the right thing.
Yeah. When it comes to real estate investing, do you think owning multiple multifamilies versus flips, what do you think is the best? I know they're very different, but what do you think is the best route?
I guess it depends on what the intentions are and goals of the individual. So, you know, I feel like in real estate, it's best to be diverse. So you can have a couple things going on at once. I think if you're young and you understand real estate, and most importantly, you understand what is a good purchase and what isn't, the long term is great. I mean, I know so many individuals that are, I don't know, maybe a generation older than me. They're just living off passive income. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, if you're in your 30s and you, in the next 3-4 years, you buy 10 properties, when you're 60, as long as you don't refi a bunch of times and you pay that debt off, you're just living off your rental income. Right. And so many people do that. Right. You know,
do you own rental income properties?
So I own a property in Vermont, but it's not a rental. It's more, one of my passions is skiing. And I would say my best memory as a child is going up to Vermont skiing. So my number one life goal was to have a place up north, because those were my best memories. And as soon as I knew I was having a child, like literally, I started my search. Yeah. Because that was my life goal.
Yeah. So that's so interesting. Why did you decide not to get involved into multifamily investing?
So I would say stage one missed the boat a little bit. And I didn't have the resources or assets 12, 14 years ago to buy a multi. You know, again, I wasn't making the best decisions at home, so I wasn't saving enough money. But I got a lot more serious when I met the right woman, not women. And, you know, the second I found out I was a father, light bulb came on. So much better decision making, but also, you know, I think everybody has a different goal in life, and wherever you see yourself in 20 years, you have to make sure you make decisions that facilitate that. So when I look at real estate, I have my primary, I have the condo. I'll eventually rent the condo out. The plan is not to just, you know, that wouldn't make any sense. Right. Because I don't use it that much. So my 20-year plan would be to own multiple properties in vacation-like, second home-like areas and utilize them, but also rent them out. So when I look at my Vermont property, if I started renting it out now, I would cover the debt and make money. So my next goal is to buy something either down south, West Coast Florida, South Carolina, or even the Cape, love Cape Cod, and do the same thing. And then just keep recharging that. Yeah. So utilize it, rent it out the rest of the time, and then you get to your passive income. Like if I'm a real estate investor and I'm serious about it, I feel like your whole goal should be to live off rental income when you retire. Why not? You know, if you own 20 properties debt free in 20 years and you're getting rental income, whether it's short term or long term, whether you get Social Security or not, you're going to have enough money to live.
Right.
That's the whole, to me, that's the whole goal.
Yeah.
Passive.
Yeah.
You hear passive.
I mean,
passive.
As it stands, depending on the government to pay you, Social Security or something, like it's a far going conclusion, honestly. You know what I mean? At this
but
point.
Also social, if you want to be this big property owner and have all these ideas and you take all this risk and put money out there, social is just going to be an icing on the cake. That's going to be a small amount to what you could potentially be bringing in. And, I know people that own 30, 40 properties and, they're retired at 45, just living off passive income.
Yeah.
Like, to me, the world changed too. If you think about it, we can work from our phone now, we can travel now. So, my whole goal, to be honest with you, is my next stage of my life, I want to work from my phone. Well, how are you going to do that? You have to have things set up like that. You have to have passive income.
Yep. What's the worst purchase you ever made?
I'm trying to think. So I haven't really made any bad big purchases, which, knock on wood. I would say the worst purchase. Probably just wasting money on experiences.
Okay.
Like going out too much or buying, being in New York, buying a pair of shoes that just costs way too much. That makes no sense. Like as I got more serious about my life, I think about the purchases and like, to me, you have to buy toilet paper and food and all that. But if there's a purchase that's outside of the box, like I want value in it. I'm a big watch guy. I would never buy a watch over retail, and I would only buy a watch that I feel like I could get at least what I paid for it.
Sure.
Or more. And if I feel like that's not going to happen, I don't buy it.
Yeah.
So I'm very thoughtful about things that I buy, even cars. I bought an SUV that's over 6,000 pounds or whatever the rule is so that it's a write-off, right? I think you have to be intelligent and intentional when it comes to that. And also not just, I've never bought something because I wanted people to see it. I've never been like that. I do like nice things, but it's for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. When it comes to the average person, what do you think is the one thing that they are spending money on that you would view as a poor financial decision? Like, what is keeping some of the middle class, some of the lower class in that same class because they keep spending their money on blank?
I don't know, sometimes like expensive clothes and wallets and watches and pocketbooks and stuff like that. I understand that people, sometimes that's important to people and I respect that, but I feel like it comes back to budgeting too. So if you feel like you're somebody in that space, you got to create a budget, put a certain amount of money aside, and then kind of like reward yourself. That's whenever I did a purchase, whether it's a luxury purchase or not, it was a result of me achieving something. I think when you look at things that way, you'll be a lot more intentional about your purchases and probably smarter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also not that I want to classify anybody like as far as income wise and making money, like make sure you're doing it for you, not for anybody else. Cause I feel like a lot of people purchase things for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
I've gotten a couple pieces of advice that, that stick with me. I would say one of them was don't count anybody else's money. That's something that stuck with me, one of my mentors. And, basically everybody is looking at the world through their own lens and everybody's just getting up, going through the same struggles and working hard. And I think one of the things that helped me curate the mindset that I have today is I've never looked at anybody and said, wow, must be nice. Or, yeah, they're lucky they grew up. I've always looked at success being a derivative of hard work. And even when I was young, like I saw the CEO at a bank or the CEO at some company. And I thought about their journey. I didn't look at where they were. I kind of looked at what it probably took to get there. And I was always obsessed with that. I didn't understand how people could get to that level. I'm like, how does that even happen? And listen, there's a reason that executives and leaders are, 50, 60. It takes a long time. And I think people lose sight of that because, we're in an instant gratification world. And when you look at any of these social channels, you're just seeing everybody's highlights. That's all you're seeing.
Yeah.
Like everybody's best picture on their profile pic. You're seeing the best, but you're not seeing the everyday struggles. And I think that's one of the downfalls of social. Like, I think there's so many attributes and so much utility in it, but it just makes everything look too easy. And guess what? It's not.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Take the most successful person in the world. They go home and bang their head against the wall, figuratively, maybe literally.
Yeah.
But life is not easy.
Right.
Everybody's got bad days, right?
What is the hardest thing of being a vice president of a bank?
I would say for me, it's just making sure that everybody has what they need every single day, whether it's support, constructive criticism, motivation. For me, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I'm obsessed with making sure everybody that's on my team has access to me and also has enough support from me. So I want to make sure that I help everybody at all times. And that's only one aspect of my job, but that's super important to me. And the team that we have here is so loyal. So I feel like it's my responsibility to show up and be there every single day. That's why I barely drink anymore. I haven't, come into work sluggish in years. That's for my son, right? Because I want to be the best version of myself. That's for my wife, but it's also for my team. I come every single day, show up to win, energetic. And that's also a different version of me. Rewind back 10, 12 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And that just goes along with the story and what I was talking about before, which is to win in business, you got to win at home. You got to win outside your business. It's got to happen collectively.
Yeah. I think it's very hard to kind of like supersede your personal development. I think some of us, our financial situation will only grow as much as our personal development grows.
Agreed.
And that's why I'm so kind of focused on that right now. Okay, as we wrap things up, what is something that you want the audience to take away? What's something that they can kind of really ponder, really sit on for a little bit and help them kind of become successful?
So probably the greatness conversation, it's something that sticks with me. And at one of my events, I talked about it a little bit. And I feel like people that don't achieve what they want, whether it's short-term or long-term, might cop out a little bit and blame it on something else, right? Something happened or I wasn't able to do it because. I think there's a misconception in this world, in life, business, sports, whatever, that people are where they are, if they're at an elevated level, there's always like a reason for it. And people discount the fact that somebody worked really hard to get there. And when I talk about the greatness conversation, I mean, most people are not just born with this knowledge, this ambition, right? It's cultivated over time. Like you look at, let's relate it to sports. Who's the greatest athlete of all time?
That's a tough one.
I'm going to say Jordan. Who's yours?
Jordan might be there. I would say I would give it to Jordan or Tom Brady.
Who else? Give me one more.
Ali. I'll put Ali up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so Ali's different because his daughter was like she was a professional boxer. Yeah. But you look at Jordan. Did he have two sons?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Did any of them make the NBA?
No.
Okay. You look at, and Brady's sons are too young. So you look at Jordan's sons grew up in, your father's the best of all time. They didn't go pro. Now there might be different reasons for that. And they didn't just wake up and become pros. Like people might look at them and say, well, they're going to be professional. Their father was the greatest athlete of all time, right? They were born great.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Will Smith, who's been away from the spotlight a little bit, he was giving an interview years back when the public loved him, and he said, greatness is not this esoteric, elusive, godlike feature that only the special among us will ever taste. It exists in all of us. Those words have resonated with me forever because it's absolutely true. And when you ask, what is something hopefully people can take away from this conversation? It's that everything that you want to achieve, you can, regardless of where you are right now, whether you have advantages, whether you have less advantages from your neighbor. So everybody that you're looking up at that you want to be or want to emulate had the same struggles as you, the same concerns as you. They might have had a different upbringing, but they just had an absolute maniacal level of ambition, good decision making, and just hunger to realize everything that they wanted to realize in their life. So to me, that's a takeaway. If you want to be great, you have to go get it. And you have to make great decisions and outwork everybody. So when you look at somebody that is executing at a level higher than you or is exactly where you want to be, there's a path to get there. Success leaves footprints, right? It's possible. Don't cop out. Don't make excuses. Just do it. It's really hard, which is why there's less people that are executing at that level. They just stuck with it, made mistakes, but made more good decisions than mistakes, and they just went all in, and that's what it takes.
Zach, thank you for hanging with us, man. I appreciate your time.